Hello everyone! We'll be starting 3.3, comparing and ordering rational numbers today. We'll be spending a couple of days on this lesson just because it's a big lesson. How many of you can speak 2 languages? I bet there's some of you who can even speak more than 2 languages. I can speak 2 languages. I can speak English and I can speak a little bit of Korean. So let's say I say pencil in English. I can say 연필 in Korean, and even though they sound different, pencil and 연필, they mean the same thing. Same thing in math. There are 2 languages in math. We have the fractions language, and we have the decimal language. We can say a number 2 different ways, but they'll still mean the same thing. For example, let's take 1/2 first. That's a popular fraction. What's 1/2 as a decimal? Hopefully you're thinking or said in your mind or even out loud 0.5 or 5/10. How about 1/4? You'll hear me say 1/4 a lot instead, just because I want you to think about 1/4, how much that's worth. 25 cents, right? So that's 25 hundredths as a decimal. Again, remember that they mean the same thing, just written in 2 different languages, the fraction language and the decimal language. How about 3/4 or 3/4? Again, I want you to think about how much you would have in your pocket if you had 3/4. You would have 75 cents. So the decimal equivalent is 75 hundredths, just written differently, but they mean the same thing. If you don't know these well, I want you guys to write this somewhere on your notes page. These are very popular fractions, and I want you to commit them to memory. Feel free to press pause. Moving on. So how do you write a fraction as a decimal? So let's say, what if I gave you 2/5? This is something that you might not know in your memory. So how would I go about writing 2/5 as a decimal? If you recall back to 3.1, 2/5 is the same thing as saying 2 divided by 5, right? 2 divided by 5. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to divide. But here's the tricky part. Is it 2 divided by 5, or is it 5 divided by 2? Hopefully you said this is the correct answer. We're not doing 5 divided by 2. We're doing 2 divided by 5. 2, again, write this in your notes if you need to. The numerator always goes in the inside. That's called your dividend. And then your denominator, which was our 5, goes on the outside. That's called your divisor. So let's go ahead and divide. I'm going to actually erase this right now just so that I can give myself more room. So again, we're doing 2 divided by 5. But wait, 5 doesn't go into 2 evenly. Actually, 2 is a smaller number than 5. 5 can't go into 2, so what do? Hopefully you remember that what you do need to do is you add a decimal and a 0. 2.0 is the same thing as saying 2. So I'm not changing the number 2, I'm just adding a decimal and a 0 after it. I can actually add as many zeros as I want, and it's still saying 2. So now let's divide. 5 doesn't go into 2, but 5 goes into 20 how many times? Hopefully you said 4. 4 needs to be written on top of the 0. Here, let me actually extend my house. Let's also bring up the decimal. I tend to have a lot of students who forget to write down that decimal. Subtract, I know 5 times 4 is 20. It goes in 4 times evenly. So my answer, guys, is 4/10. 4/10 is the same thing as saying 2/5. Again, two languages, but they mean the same thing. Your turn. I want you to change the following fractions into decimals: 3/10 and 3/4. Hopefully this one looks familiar. Please press pause if you need more time. Let's start with number 1. We're going to go 3 divided by 10. Again, remember the numerator always goes on the inside and the denominator goes on the outside. I see that 10 doesn't go into 3, but I add a decimal and a 0 here. And I see that 10 goes into 30. Oops, almost messed up there. 3 times evenly. Class, 3/10 is the same thing as saying, look, 3/10 as a decimal. How about 3/4? Hopefully you've memorized by now that 3/4 or 3/4 is the same thing as saying 75/100. But let me do the work just to prove it to you all. It's 3 divided by 4. 4 doesn't go into 3, but 4 does go into 30 how many times? 7 times. 28. I subtract, I have to borrow. So 10 minus 8 is 2. I add another 0 because I still have a remainder there. Bring it down. 4 goes into 25 times. We see, class, that 3/4 is the same thing as saying 75/100. How is half represented as a fraction? It should take you 2 seconds, hopefully. How is half represented as a decimal? 5/10. Let's keep going. Now let's talk about where these decimals are on the number line. Let's start with 6/10. Is that more than or less than half? Hopefully you said more than, because you can see that 6/10 is more than 5/10, right? We know that 5/10 is half. So since 6/10 is more than, we say greater than. Greater than half. How about 4? 7/8. Is 7/8 more than or less than half? Take a moment. Hopefully you guys all said more than again, or greater than half. If you look at 7/8, think about it. 7/8 is almost 1 whole, so we know for sure that 7/8 is greater than 1/2. How about 2/5? Is 2/5 less than or greater than half? Take a moment. We're going to say less than half. Why? Because I know my denominator here is a 5. What is half of 5? Hopefully you said 2.5. If half of 5 is 2.5, I know that 2 is less than 2.5. So we know that 2/5 has to be less than half. How about number 6, 49/100? Is 49/100 more than or less than half? This one's tricky for some. This one is less than half. Why? Think about it in money terms. Wouldn't this be 49 cents? And we know that 49 cents is less than half, which is half of a dollar, which is 50 cents. So 49/100 is less than half. Tonight's homework is on the back side of this notes page. Please place this page after last night's homework, the 3.2 practice, which was page, just make sure it's placed after page 58, class.